Hi, I'm Albert Wutch and I'm here in Texas with a hind leg of a wild hog. So this would be the back right hind leg. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna fabricate and take a shank off of here. We're gonna inject these shanks and make some braised wild hog shanks. To get to this down here to the shank, we do have to, I wanna cut all the way down here and cut around this knee joint. So I'm just gonna come in and literally cut right through here to this joint. Now on the joint, there's some tendons there. Cutting through any joint takes some skill sometimes to get to it, but basically what we want to do is, if you look here, we have to come back up around that ball right there and get in there to cut the tendon, because I want to get all this meat on the leg there. And this is going to shrink as it cooks, so that's why I want to get as much meat as possible on the bone. And when you're working on a bench or the table, it's nice where you can just take this and come in with the knife and cut around here. Never fails when you're looking for it. And be careful you don't cut yourself as you're cutting down towards that joint. So here's the joint right there, right up here. So we're just gonna cut right around here. So it's nice to get down so that you can use some leverage and pop this off. And you gotta get through that tendon. So now we've got, these are the hind shanks. These two are the fore shanks. And what we're gonna do with these, we're going to inject a brine into these and soak them in the brine overnight. Then we're gonna pat them dry, season them, brown them off, and braise them for a good 6 hours tomorrow. So we have our wild hog shanks, the fore shanks, the hind shanks, and we're gonna use some other axis deer. So this piece here is the front shoulder clod, off both shoulder clods, and then the heels and the shanks from our deer. So we're gonna brine them to make our braised shanks. These are all tough cuts, so we can braise them. So check out our other video on how to make a brine and all the uses for different brines. So we prepared the brine last night. We dissolved all of the curing salt, sugars, garlic, pepper, onion, and we're straining it now. So we're gonna use, so we strain that out so we don't have anything in there that'll clog this up. And I put some air through there, and we're going to inject it down near the bone for starters. But you can watch that meat pump right up. Of course, you don't want to use the brine over, and of course you want to make sure that it's kept in stainless or plastic or glass. You definitely don't want to put it in aluminum, because the salts from the brine will eat right into that aluminum. We're trying to get 10% of the green weight. So if the meat weighed 10 pounds, we try to get 1 to 2 pounds of brine in here. So we easily have 10 pounds of meat here. So we're just going to inject it. We want to try to get it as close to the bone as possible. And of course, if you were using, if you wanted to use legs and thighs of a goose or a turkey, that's fine, because these recipes are all interchangeable. Once we get it all pumped up, then we're going to submerge these, and that's when, if we wanted to, we could add more pickling spice to this. In a sense, making like pickled or corned meat. Wild hog and axis, and the tough cuts of the axis deer. So this is a recipe definitely for less tender cuts. Okay, so these brined overnight, and we rinsed them off, and we patted them dry a little bit, but some of the brine is still coming out of them because they're pretty pumped up here. So we lightly oiled them and trimmed a little bit of this tacky fascia off because it got really, really white in the brine, which is normal. So they look pretty good. They're lightly coated. Now we're gonna season them with some Rectech freaking Greekin seasoning, and we're gonna lightly sear them and then take them out and put them into a pan, because we're here at camp and we don't have the perfect ideal pan. We would want a big rondeau, straight-sided saute pan, but we don't have that. So we're gonna sear them in these two pans, put them in there, put some mirepoix and vegetables in there, get some stock and broth, and bring it to a boil, cover it, throw it in the oven, cook it until it's fork tender. We wanna season them good. This is a very tough cut of meat. It's got a lot of connective tissue. There's a lot of sinew in there, a lot of bone. And with the marinade, of course, the brine, that will keep the meat nice and red. But this long cooking process is what's gonna have to make this meat tender, fall off the bone tender. Okay, now we're gonna sear this, and I'm gonna roll down my sleeves because it's moist and wet, and we don't want it to splatter up on us. I'm gonna use a little bit of oil, and we're gonna take these and we're gonna try to put them basically fat side down, which on these shanks, they all seem to be flat side down. This meat is still fairly cool, so it's seasoned well. You can already see the color, the different color in the meat. Now this dish is a little different. We're not going to have a thickening agent in here. We're just gonna use a light broth. We're gonna add root vegetables, which would be turnips, rutabagas, carrots, onions, garlic, and then we're gonna top it off with some cabbage and some stone ground mustard and sour cream tomorrow. So that looks like a nice boar shank. This is gonna be chewy. It's like, you know, when you go to Disney and you see those kids walking around with that cured smoked ham leg, it looks like a big ice cream cone. Same exact thing. And we're gonna remove this piece out. And now we're gonna start to deglaze that pan. So deglaze is to remove the fond, F-O-N-D, the brown stuff on the bottom of the pan. We want that because that's flavor and color. And we're gonna throw in a little bunch of parsley stems that were left over. And we're just gonna, now that onion and those vegetables will sweat in there and remove all the goodies out of the bottom of that pan. Now this one pretty much removed already, so we're just gonna dump that in there. We're gonna take some chicken broth, and that's totally deglazing this pan. So now when we bring it to the dishwasher, it's nice and clean. We got all the color and flavor in the dish, not down the dish sink. We're gonna pour the vegetables, the mirepoix in with all the meat. Again, this would be the perfect size pan to braise in, but we have a lot more than just, 3 or 4 portions. So now you can see the color. You can see the color in here that we achieved from that fond. And remember, the meat has been brined, so it's pickled, so it's gonna taste somewhat like corned beef. Now this we're gonna pour right in here. So this was just boiling. I know it was boiling. I don't have to put this on the stovetop to bring it to a boil. And now we're just gonna spread this out a little bit. We're gonna put a couple bay leaves in here. Looks good. And we're gonna cover it, put it into a 350 degree oven until this is fork tender. Fork tender means fall off the bone. Low and slow. With a pan this size and shanks that large, we're gonna put this in the oven at 325 for about 6 hours. Of course, we're gonna check it every 2 or 3 hours to make sure we got the right consistency, check that tenderness, check the flavor. And then the last hour before we take it out, then we're gonna add our rutabagas, our turnips, some more onions, some more carrot, and some cabbage, and we're gonna finish it up. So we've braised the shanks, the wild hog shanks and the axis shanks for 6 hours. And when we did that, we browned them really good. We added mirepoix and our stock to it. We brought it to a boil, covered it, cooked it in the oven. It's fork tender now. But the mirepoix, the vegetables that we put in with it, have basically rendered down and cooked down to nothing, making this beautiful broth from all of the collagen from the meat and the flavor of the meat and all the vegetables. So we strained it off, and now we have potatoes and turnips and rutabagas and carrots and onions and cabbage in here. It's a little fatty, but we're gonna take that fat off when we take it out of the oven. We've got it on the range top right now, and the stock or the broth is not as hot as I want it to be. So I'm just gonna fire it up here to get it hot so it doesn't take as long in the oven. The pieces are cut different shapes or sizes for presentation, but we try to get them halfway uniform so that they're all cooked at the same time. Meaning if I left big pieces of potatoes or whole potatoes in there, they wouldn't have cooked as fast as some of these smaller pieces. So we're gonna get this to come to a boil. Whenever you're working on the range top, doesn't matter if it's a broth like this or heavy cream, and you got a lot of fat on the top, you gotta be really careful that it doesn't boil over and start a fire, because that fat is really flammable. And again, whenever you braise, the last thing that you do after adjusting the flavor and the seasoning is to make sure you degrease it, because most of the time when we braise, we're braising fatty, tough pieces of meat. So we got a still boil, we got some bubbles here, but we don't want a rapid boil because we don't want that fat to come over the edge and start a fire. So we're good as far as temperature goes. We're gonna cover it, and into the oven it goes. When I do that, I pull a rack out. So just put it on the rack and then push the rack in rather than try to reach all the way in there. I got that temperature up to 400 degrees because I want it to cook fast. So now we got the shanks and the vegetables in the oven. They should be done. Let's hope they are. And we're gonna bring them out and plate them up, finish it up. Well, let's check it out. Let's see what these veggies look like when you open these things up. Be careful the steam doesn't burn you. And here are our shanks. So we cooked for 6 hours. We brined them. So this was the shank. Well, you know what? We got some hungry hunters. I think when one hunter can eat this whole meal right here. Because really when you look at this, there's all this bone and then there's a lot of gelatinous muscle in there. So it's, you know, you're gonna be a lot of picking through it. It's not all meat. Now in the vegetables, we have potatoes, turnips, rutabagas, carrots, onions, garlic. So we want to make sure that we get a couple spuds in there. These hunters have been out in the woods all day, so they're going to eat up a storm. Of course, we have to taste this. This is important before I put it on the plate. Ooh, that's good. Just right amount of turnips and rutabagas. Sometimes you can get the rutabagas or turnips, you can get a little strong. Now we're just going to take a thin wedge of cabbage, top off this side of the platter, and any braised dish should be served smothered in the liquid that it was cooked in. And we'll put a little bit of broth on the side. We have a little bit of horseradish sour cream. Looking forward to tasting that. I'll put a little dab of horseradish sour cream on here. We have some old style stone ground mustard, which will complement that brine. And for the people that like it hot, we'll give them a little color. And of course, we can't get out of there without a little bit of greenery. So this was some chopped parsley that we had chopped. So this is our braised wild hog shank. If you enjoyed the video today and these recipes, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications, and of course, come eat with us.